All right, guys, this is my Kimber Classic Stainless 45 ACP. This, in fact, was my duty weapon when I was doing drug interdiction. And you may notice that it's got these probably different wood grips than what you're used to seeing. These are made from the deck wood from the battleship Texas. And they were sold as a fundraising deal when they were trying to preserve the battleship Texas. And so they took the deck wood off of the ship and made these grips available. And I was obviously real quick to jump on that. I'm a big fan of the battleship Texas. And this weapon's been sitting for some time. And it's gotten pretty dusty, pretty dirty. It was fired at the range and not cleaned the last time that it was taken out. And how in the world that happened, I'm not 100% sure, because that is not my normal. But not really many upgrades on this. It is a classic, and it was made to be similar to like a custom. It's got the special mag well. It's got the checkered back grip, back strap. The big beaver tail, Trujicon night sights, and not too much else has been done to this particular gun. That's about it, more or less straight out of the box. Now, obviously, I've already cleared this. I'm going to go ahead and clear it again right now just to be safe. Nothing in the hole, nothing down there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice slow-paced process of cleaning this gun. We're not trying to do this super fast. We're going to take our time and go through this, and we're not trying to say that anything that we're doing on this video is the way. Obviously, there's a million points of contention. Anytime somebody makes a video like this, you're going to have quite a few people who are going to tell you 10 different ways to do something better than what you did. And this thing it's pretty gunked up right now. It's pretty dirty. I can feel it, and we want to get this thing cleaned up and put back to ready status. So I'm going to do a few things that are a little bit atypical for most people who'd be cleaning a full-size Kimber 45 like this. For example, down here, to remove the bushing on the end, Kimber actually supplies each weapon with a tool that compresses the button and allows you to turn the bushing to remove it. I don't have that. That's probably something that was lost early on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this now. There's a really pretty stout little ridge right there around that. You can push that down with your finger if you want to, but it's not super easy to do. And what you've got to do is, the very first step is depressing that and rotating this bushing. You rotate it clockwise in order to remove the cap and the spring if you want to. Some people leave the spring in, and then you take it back counterclockwise to actually remove the bushing. So what I'm going to do is, I've got an older, or I should say a used off-brand magazine right here. This is I think it's a Pro Mag, and it's also for 45 ACP. It doesn't actually fit this weapon because the mag well and the bumper on this mag don't match up. But I'm going to show you how you can utilize something, pretty much anything that you have. I like this because the end of it is plastic, and it's not going to do any damage to the stainless steel to this gun. First thing that really helps right there. Put that slide lock on right there, and that's going to help you an awful lot with pushing this down and not letting that slide actuate while you're doing it. So I'm going to depress that button and bring this little guy around. Now, what you want to do, you can see that I've already rotated it just a little bit right there. You don't want to rotate it so much that you come all the way off of it on, your first little attempt at turning this bushing. because this obviously it does have that recoil spring in there, and this cap in that spring will take off. And if you should happen to have this aimed at your face, that may not end up so well. So you want to take your time getting this out. Now this will all function a whole lot better once it's all been cleaned, lubricated, and put back together. So when they've been setting for a little while and you've got a lot of dust, especially one's been fired and not cleaned right after it was done, you're gonna end up having a harder time with this, because you've got a lot of grit and grime and buildup on the back side of this bushing that just does not allow that to turn super easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take it. Now there is a point where you can turn this just a slight bit more and catch just the very, very edge of that cap and still hold this in here. Okay, and that's the ideal place to go. You probably don't want to come all the way off of that button while you're depressing it with some sort of a tool or anything else. So if you see right now that bushing has caught just the very edge of the inside of that cap right there, and that's what's going to hold that in there long enough now for me to, you notice I'm keeping this pointed away from my face. My face is back on this side. I'm aiming it more at the camera. It still wouldn't be fun to hit the camera with it, but now what I can do is I can actually go ahead and push this down with my thumb and rotate that bushing the rest of the way out of the way, and then manage that cap along with that spring on out. Now this is the point where you can leave this in here. Some people choose to leave the spring in there while they do more disassembly. Personally, I like to go ahead and get this thing out of there so I can rotate this bushing a little easier. You can rotate the bushing and go right through some of the coils, but it's a whole lot better, in my opinion, to go ahead and just get this spring on out of there. You may notice that the spring has two very distinct ends to it. You've got an end that's more flat, and then you've got an end that finishes with just a coil sticking out right there. And so you should make note that that flat end is always going to go down on that guide rod and sit on there. So your open coil end will always be on the open end of the weapon. Your flat end will sit down there on the flat end of that guide rod. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set that spring aside. I've got the cap out. It's looking a little dirty there. I'm going to set that aside. Now then, in order to get this bushing out, you've got to bring it back around and cross all the way over, going counterclockwise now. Now, oddly enough, even though there's no spring pressure on this right now, sometimes this can be one of the hardest things to do, is to get this to move on past this. And you've got to get this moved all the way on around. You've got to get it on around. Having that little tool would be fantastic right about now. I don't have that tool, so we're just gonna wedge this thing on around like this. I don't recommend at all that you ever use any sort of metal like a screwdriver. I've seen people use all sorts of things to try and move something like this. Now if you wanted to get some sort of a cloth and put on it, I've got a cloth right here. If you wanted to just to help your fingers a little bit, grab a hold of that little bushing and push it on around with something to help protect your fingers. By all means, you know, whatever you have to do in order to get that little thing to spin on around, you can certainly do, but I would not recommend putting a screwdriver or using anything like that to move that thing on around. If you can see kind of right now how far it has cleared, it's got just a tiny little bit more to go, and then this thing's going to be able to come out. Now the next thing that's going to be very difficult to do is actually get this bushing out. If your gun is clean, if you're maintaining a clean weapon, then you won't have a hard time, but I know from years of experience that pulling this bushing out in just a moment is not going to be the easiest thing in the world, and sometimes you do have to get something really thin and get it in between there to just gently nudge that up. So let's just, first of all, let's go ahead and try and get this thing around here. I don't know if you can tell or not, my hands are pretty gimpy right now from lots of work that I've done outside. Probably not the best time to be doing this particular video, but nonetheless, here we are. We need to get it done, so that's what we're doing today. Okay, now then that has turned enough. It's clear of that rod right now, so that rod's down. This will actually rotate just a little bit more, but I'm gonna actually use, got a pretty fine point on this. I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna put it just very gently underneath that and wedge that up. Okay, so what I just did is I just barely and gently put the edge of that blade in there, just gently, and just slightly lifted it up, and it went ahead and popped on out. Okay, now that thing should go ahead and come out. So now I've got the bushing out. So about 1,000 different ways to go from here. There are people who do, you've got to take that, you got to take the slide lock off, obviously, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this pin out. Okay, and it obviously pushes through from the other side. I'm sure you're certainly familiar with this, but you have to line it up. There's a tiny little notch right there in the slide, and it's really important. There are people who grip this and they do some magic, and they've just handled their weapon so many times that, they kind of like showing off just a little bit with doing that. But the bottom line is you need to move this slide back until this end of the pin right there lines up with that little slot, and then you can push it through from this side. And so what I'm going to do is just gently push that back. There you see that I've got it lined up. I'm going to take my finger on this side and start to push that pin out. Okay, and get that pin slightly released, slightly elevated. I think you can see that that has lifted up. And then you can go ahead and remove the pin. Okay. Now then, again, 37 different directions you can go. There are people who are going to do a grip like this. There are people who might still have the spring in here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this thing upside down, just because that's the common way that I've always done this, and go ahead and separate the main body of the weapon. Well, that is really looking ugly. Separate that from the slide. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take that spring rod, that guide rod for the spring out. I don't know if you can see how filthy that thing is, but it's pretty bad. And then in order to actually get the barrel out, I'm just going to push the little lug forward just so that it clears as it goes through. And then you've got it out. You've got your barrel disassembled. So as of right now, we've got our slide removed from the main frame. We've got the main frame. Got the spring guide rod right there. There's our pin. There's our spring. We've got our barrel. We have our bushing and our spring cap. And that is the extent of field stripping a Kimber full-size 45 ACP. Now we're going to go to actually cleaning the weapon. All right, let's talk about some of our cleaning supplies real quick. And we've got just a small assortment of brass brushes right here. There's a cleaning handle, a couple of rods. And let me show you what a lot of people would do is use a shorter rod. Of course, you want to get the appropriate brush. So this one happens to be the one for the 45. Let me show you what using too short of a cleaning rod does. Okay, we're going to move these other ones out of the way here. Okay, so this is all tightened down. Everything here is nice and snug. Now the rod is meant to rotate at a certain point. And that's not a malfunction. That's actually built that way. Okay. Be sure that everything is very, very straight. This piece should connect very firmly to the handle if you have something similar to this. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've just got a rod with, you know, a handle on it, but you're going to have a pivot point usually built in because you need your brush to be able to move through that rifling in the barrel and to be able to rotate. So let me show you what a lot of people do. I'm going to go ahead and move these other brushes out of the way, the ones we don't need. Now, when it comes time to clean the actual barrel, if I push this in, I'm going to push it in and it's going to bottom out about right there. Okay. Do this again and kind of show you what I'm talking about. This goes in, and I would actually put it in there, but I don't have any solvent in here and I don't really want to create the exact problem that I'm talking about. But when I run this brush through this bore, the handle is going to hit about right here, which means that brush is going to stop before it actually fully clears the end of the barrel. Okay. The problem with that is that now I've got to change directions, and every one of the wire bristles on this brush have turned as it goes through that rifling on the bore, and pulling it back through means that I've got to put some pretty substantial force on this to be able to bend all of these and change direction. What you really want to be able to do is to start at one end and go all the way through until your brush fully clears the end of that bore, the end of that barrel. So in this case, that means that although it would be nice to get to use a really short rod like that, I'm going to have to go ahead and put another piece in here. Again, if I had just put this in here and started twisting, I would think that something was stripped out, but you've got to remember it's got that built-in pivot point that's made to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the brush in the end of this. Put that in there. Now, sometimes on some cleaning kits, you actually get your rotational portion, your pivot point is actually built into the end of the brush. On this one, it's down here on the rod. Okay, so when I take this now and I drive it through here, it's going to very easily clear the end of the bore, the end of the barrel, long before my handle bottoms out on the other end. Okay, so that being said, I've got this really, really nice gun cleaning mat right here. I am going to put a towel down across here because we're about to make a little bit of a mess. We're going to stretch this out. Let me show you real quickly some of the other things that I have here for cleaning, just in the event that you want to get an idea. I've got some swabs, some Q-tip type swabs. I get the really inexpensive dollar store version. They come with cotton balls and whatever these little things are for removing makeup or whatever, but I just like the Q-tip part, the cotton swabs, whatever they call those things. Those are really, really good for $1. Okay, so I've got those. I've got a combination of brushes here. I've got a softer nylon brush. I've got a brass brush, and this is obviously not going to hurt the metal on your weapon. You don't want to go crazy with something like this, but you want to stick with these softer bristle brushes like this. And I'm gonna set these aside. And then of course I've got my solvent. This is hops number 9, or I'm not sure that I'm saying that right. You hear people say it both ways. I have always said hop, so I'm going to call it hop. So hops number 9 right there. And then for whenever we go back to assemble, we've got the hops traditional gun oil. And that's what we're going to use to put that thing back together. So that's just a general idea. And I have more of these cloths so that I can, utilize that in the event that I need to. I personally like to go ahead and also take the grips off the gun. So I know that an awful lot of stuff can build up in that mag well, and I'm going to go ahead and take these out. So one of the things that you have to have in order to take those grips out, obviously, is a screwdriver. So I've got this one with these different tips on it. I want to get something a little bit smaller there. I'll pull that up there. Utilize one of these smaller. Go ahead and take that off. Put that in there, and you would be very, very careful. There's nothing uglier, in my opinion, than knurled up grip screws. So you want to be very, very, very careful with those. Just take your time. Don't let your screwdriver slip and slide. Don't get in any sort of a hurry. Let me show you something else whenever it comes time to put this back together that I like to do, which is aligning the direction of the slots in the screws. I know that sounds really, really funny. A little bit anal about that. Well, there's that grip. I'm gonna push that out a little bit from the inside. There you go. Lift it up just a little bit, and then you should be able to get that off. And got some pretty good stuff built up there. Battleship Texas engraved right there on the inside of the grip. These things were fairly expensive and super hard to get, and I'm very, very proud of these. I may show those off a few more times before we're finished today. You're going to get sick and tired of seeing them. But just to think of all of the service and the sailors and the history that's happened on the deck of the Battleship Texas, that makes that wood right here very, very, very special. And obviously it's, you know, seen some wear and tear. There's some nicks and bumps and things like that on these grips, but you know what? This is not a show gun. This is a real deal carry it and use it kind of gun. Let's go ahead and get this one popped out. All right, there you go. There's the second Battleship Texas right there. So I'm going to set those aside, and you can probably see just exactly how much stuff there is around here. It just makes this easier to clean, and in my opinion, in the end, short of taking, you know, your internal spring and all of this assembly apart, taking the grips off and cleaning underneath that's not a whole lot of trouble. Shouldn't be too much trouble for anybody to do that. So that's about as stripped as we're gonna go for today. Now then, get this thing and set it aside. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and start with the actual barrel itself. What we wanna do is get this thing completely cleaned out, and it's not gonna be fun getting this thing clean. It requires an awful lot of getting solvent on your hands. Your hands end up smelling like solvent. Yeah, they have the solvent that doesn't have, it's the low odor version of solvent, but I don't think that stuff is amazing. I am a big fan of the traditional stuff, and if you look up, I'm really, really hoping that this is just an awful lot of build up on the end of this barrel right here. We'll get a brush in just a minute and see if we can cut through that, or if that is actually etched into the surface of this weapon just from age and time and carrying this thing in the rain and everything else. So we'll kind of take a look at that here in just a second, but let's go ahead. I'm gonna try real hard to keep that solvent off of some of these cuts and things that I have in my hand. So normally I would maybe find some gloves or something, but we're just gonna get after this today. So let's get this solvent open first. Go ahead and Get this stuff opened up. Boy, that is a very, very, very well-known smell. If you've been around guns for any length of time and done any sort of cleaning, then this is so distinctive. You either love it or you hate it. I know a lot of guys that say it's the worst thing in the world. I tend to like it a lot. Now, here's where we're going to start doing things that, you know, people are going to disagree with. And typically in the comment section on a video like this is where things start to kind of go crazy. But what I'd ask you to do is just remember, we're all in the same culture. We all love the same thing. So you can disagree with me. You can disagree with other people. You can, you know, be constructive and share a better way to do something, give some advice or whatever you'd like to do. But all I'd ask is that you always remain friendly and remember that we're all stuck on this round ball together, and there's a certain amount of suck factor for every one of us. So rather than just being ugly for the sake of being ugly, try being helpful and kind and see how far that'll take you. There's an awful lot of people out there right now that are not helpful and kind. All right, so right there, dipping the actual brush in the solvent. That's one of the first things that a lot of people are going to take issue with me on. And I'm going to drive that all the way through. I'm going to bring it all the way back out the other side. And I'm going to run this a few times and try and break down some of the nastiness that's inside that bore. Okay, I'm going to get a little more solvent on here, and I'm going to hit this a few times. Usually when you really start breaking it down good, you'll start seeing it drip out the end when you know you've got that thing really getting clean. Okay, so you notice that I'm making very, very full all the way from one side out the other end and then pulling it back through again. Being pretty gentle with that. Okay, I don't know if you saw that or not, but right there at the end, starting to get those drips of the really dirty solvent right there. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll set that aside for just a second. Let some of that run out. And I'm going to take a look down through the bore right here, and I'm going to see just what that looks like. Sometimes you can actually see, depending on what kind of ammo you've been using, you can generally see some of the stuff built up if you've got lead fouling and stuff like that. If you've been using like some really not so awesome ammo, then you're going to be able to see some of that stuff built up in the bore. I've been firing really, really good ammo, so I don't have an awful lot of that. There is obviously buildup in there, but there's not a lot of lead fouling or anything like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take this brush off. And we're going to trade that out. Let's put this is where we're gonna run our patches through there, and we're gonna got these, get a few of those out. Set those down there. I like to put this thing in a bit of a triangle like that and get an end of it through there. Pull that on through. All right, try and get that fairly evenly spaced. And get a little bit of solvent. I'm not dipping the whole thing in there, but there's a reasonable amount of solvent on that. I'm going to start running this through this gun and basically mopping the inside of this bore. Now, some people would say you should do this first to just start to break that fouling down. I don't disagree with that. That is certainly an option. But dipping your brush in oil and then running it through like that's not necessarily a horrible idea either. Okay, that patch is going to be pretty much done real quick. I'll go ahead and take this off here. And that is why we have a towel down here right now. We're gonna get a second one. So I'm gonna fold this in half. Now I'm not finished with this, but what I want to do is I want to go through there and I want to kind of dry mop some of that solvent out of there real quick, okay? Before I run another one through there with solvent on it. Okay? I think this is a good opportunity for me to get some of that crud off the end down there. Let me use this. I'm going to take a quick look at it. It's looking really good. It's looking very clean. So I'll take this one. Now you could use this one. It's not got so much stuff on it and utilize that, but these are not super expensive. So in order to keep your solvent from getting super contaminated, it's just too easy to go ahead and put a new one of these on. Fold it into a triangle again, try to get a little point. Get it through the end of that. And okay, this time I'm going to get a little solvent on here again. Okay, got that about half load of solvent. Put it in the bore. And go to cleaning again. Now when I do bring it out on this other end, I'm making sure that I'm getting that solvent and brushing all along the little feed ramp right there, just the throat of that. I'm actually hitting that as well. And you can do this as much as you want, running this solvent through the barrel until you're happy with how clean it is. I had a police academy instructor that told me that you would keep doing this until you pull it out completely clean, that it looks as good coming out at the end as it does whenever you put it in. And you decide how far you want to take that. I'm going to run this through here a few more times. Okay. Keep cleaning that a little more. Okay. I'm going to take this one out. Building up a nice little collection of those right there. Let me get another one. And I think this time I feel like I'm getting pretty close to where I want to be with this barrel. Let's go ahead and get some more solvent on that. Put that in there. Mop this out one more time, I think. Let's take a look at that and see how we look. Okay, we're getting pretty good there. Other than the oil on there, it's just pretty darn clean. And it's not going to look white like this because it's wet. It's got the oil in it. But that does look pretty good right there. Okay. Pull that one out. All right, let's see what we can do to break some of this stuff off the end, if that's going to come off, and it very well may not. I'm not 100% sure if time and weather have just eaten through the coating, the finish, or if that can actually come off. So we're gonna give it a little shot. We'll take that one that we used just a second ago. Put a little solvent on there. Let that work on that just a little bit on the end there. And then we will take our softer brush, see if this is going to do anything to it. I really don't expect that it will. All right, unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to ramp that up just a little bit. We have to go just a little bit more aggressive on that. Step it on up to, let's see, why don't we use that brass brush on this? All right. Let's give this a yeah, unfortunately, it does look like it's thinning this out, but it does not. I'm not 100% sure this is actually coming off here. I'm gonna hold this with this. Okay, well, maybe we are making some progress here. All right, we are definitely getting through that. So I'm going to say that this is build up on here. I'm going to keep working on that a little bit. See if we can't get that all the way cleaned off there. Okay, that's already looking tremendously better. Put a little more solvent on here. To lose my okay. It is looking substantially better. I'm extremely grateful that that is coming off there. I could probably polish this and get that 100% out. I have a feeling it's going to leave just a tiny little bit of staining on there, but that's okay. We can live with that. The majority of that crud, that buildup, is almost gone. Keep hitting this for just another little bit. See if we can't go ahead and get every bit of that off there. Starting to think that we actually can. That is looking tremendously better. Give it just a little bit more on this side right here. Hey, I am really happy with that. Okay, I think we got through it. I don't want to keep going too much because I really don't want to do my own damage to this, but little tiny bit of staining there, not anything terrible. And I'll hit this again the next time I clean this, just to be 100% sure that it's really, really clean and good. Now I am going to use this just a tiny little bit right there on that. I'm not going to use that much at all. That is about it right there. Let me get that little ramp nice and clean. Run this a little bit on the outside of this. Be sure that every bit of this is and I've got a little bit of staining right there on the side of that. I'm going to go ahead and hit that with this as well. Gently. I am not hitting that hard at all. I do not, even though this is the proper kind of bristles to do this with, I am not a fan of damaging the weapon. Not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I think that little bit of buildup is coming off there as well. I am not pushing on that very hard. I could push a lot harder and probably go ahead and get all the way through that, but we're not going to do that. So wipe this thing down. All right. And until it's time to actually reassemble this Kimber, I'm going to say that that barrel is ready to go for this field cleaning. It feels better, it looks better. That is tremendously better. Okay, I'm going to take that and set that aside and bring the slide out next. Now you can disassemble the firing pin, you can remove that, the ejector, you can take every bit of that out. We're not going to do that today. We're obviously just kind of field cleaning this gun right now to get it quickly back into action. And one thing that you want to be very careful of whenever you are working on any sort of a weapon that has night sights on it, and these are, like I said, Trijicons, you want to be very careful that you don't get any solvent on those, because it will put them out. You will lose the glow, the iridium, whatever your sights are made from, that will go away. So we don't want to do that. There's nothing wrong with wiping those just a tiny little bit with like a Q-tip or something like that. But we're not going to be doing an awful lot of solvent on this slide. That's just simply not a really good idea. Now I will take the handle again, and I will go back to my 45 ACP brush, and I will, let's move these out of the way. I will get some solvent going in here, but I'm going to be extremely careful about where that solvent actually ends up. So I'm going to get just a little bit on here and go up in this bore and put mainly down those grooves in the slide. Get inside those. Do the same thing over on this side. And then anything that you have, any sort of crud that you have built up in that slide, now's your time to hit that really good with your brush. Again, same kind of bristles, you're not going to actually hurt anything. And then it's time to get your Q-tips fired up. Pull a few of these out. And we'll go through usually quite a few of these. It all just kind of depends on how clean or how dirty the gun is, but you want to get in there and start cleaning out those grooves and all of the little places where not so nice stuff builds up. In there can be quite a bit. If you need to actually dip one of these in solvent in order to get in here and clean, then by all means do that. If there's literally nothing in the world wrong with doing that, I'll even use a patch at times, just like this, to reach down there and clean some of the stuff out. Sure, get all of that stuff out of there. I'm just using the Q-tips to clean up every little corner inside here. I want this thing to be just as clean as we can get it. In a cleaning session like this. Looking reasonably good. Just got some more to do here. We can consider this done. We are getting there. Normally I'd like to go ahead and get that pin out of there and clean behind it. But for today, we are going to be happy with this. And a fair amount of crud still in those grooves in the slide there. Let me try and get those really, really good. Alright, that's getting a whole lot better now. Okay. Once that Q-tip starts looking pretty clean, then you know you're getting there. Until that though, you need to keep running that through there and cleaning that out tremendously. This side seems to have a little bit more buildup than that other side did. Like I said, we're not in any sort of a hurry. We are taking our time. There may be times when it makes more sense to go faster, but for us, for this video, right now, we are not in a hurry. I hope that you're enjoying this. I hope that if you have a Kimber, a full-size Kimber, it's a little bit different on the Ultra CDP. The takedown is a little bit different. There's actually a hole in the barrel where you stick a pin in and then let the slide lock back against that pin in order to disassemble it. So it's just a little bit different than this. I'm gonna grab a different cloth now, get a really, really clean cloth, and I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna start getting after this slide here just a little bit on the outside. Wipe those night sights off. I don't have any solvent. I have nothing on this. This is strictly just a clean cloth here. Get those things cleaned up. And if you were to do a real close-up on portions of this, like where you've got your sights are dovetailed in like that, you're gonna have a little bit of buildup around these things. And if you have a pick, sometimes even a toothpick, you can really get in there and do a good job of cleaning those things. Okay, get this side. Just literally going over the outside of that slide right now. Be very, very careful with this. I'm not going to hit the front of that sight, but I am going to try and get in there a little bit in that dovetail I was just talking about. Okay, that seems to have helped quite a bit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, let's get some of this used stuff out of here now. Okay, so we've got our slide taken care of. We've got a really, really clean barrel right now, and we're gonna move on to the next part. As I finish these things, I'm moving them from the one side of my cleaning area to the other side. Not that I would get too super confused about that and end up not knowing what I'd done. I still wanna, just makes it a whole lot easier to know everything over here has been finished and that everything on this side still needs to be done. So what I'm gonna do now, I've got this spring rod right here, this guide rod. I'm gonna start by just wiping it down. See how clean I can get it just with wiping this thing down. Actually pretty clean. Not too bad at all there. And get this brush after it, just to get any of that loose stuff out. Be sure and clean where that spring sits. Get that all very, very, very clean. Don't need any debris or anything like that sitting down there playing games with our spring. Okay. Looks pretty good. Okay. Just lightly hit the end of that with that brass brush. Yes, the very end of this rod on this particular weapon is actually exposed through that spring cap. Okay, move that on over there. Okay, and we've got our bushing here. I'm gonna just scrub it a little bit on the inside with the bore brush. Then we hit the outside of this with this brass brush. That's really important on this. If you know anything about the fit and finish of a Kimber, especially an older one, you know that the tolerances are extremely tight. So having any sort of buildup, it's not like on an old Colt 1911. It's loosey-goosey and sounds like a laundry machine. It's not like that. They make these things and the tolerances are just absolutely unbelievably tight. Use that cloth to go in there. All right, that's looking pretty good. Okay, pretty happy with that bushing right there. Okay, gonna move that over. And we got our spring. Springs are interesting. best thing you can do is usually get your cloth and put a thumbnail in between the grooves and then take your time spiraling that thing down and then doing it the other way. Basically, I've got my thumb stuck with some of the material from this cloth in between the spring, and I am unscrewing the spring, which makes my thumb ride all the way down to the end of this thing till it comes off the end. You see those marks right there, then you see what's coming off of that spring. Now, if you have to, you can actually get solvent after this, but typically just a really good cleaning with a cloth like that's going to get your spring well taken care of. If you see anything on it, that's a whole different thing, and you need to pay particular attention to that. But usually your spring does a pretty good job of, it's so dynamic and it moves so much, it makes it very hard for too much to build up on there, just because it's spring material that's constantly, it's dynamic every time the weapon is fired. So move that on over there. We're getting down to the frame now. So this is where we're going to have to spend a little additional time scrubbing and cleaning, especially down in the mag well, right here in the bottom of the frame, and then of course cleaning this outside out here. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to use that bore brush. I'm going to get a little bit of solvent on it, and I'm going to get to work scrubbing out this mag well. Get that throat, that ramp right there, the part that actually sits in the frame and meets up to your barrel. You want to be sure you get that very clean. That's where you're going to have so much fouling and so much buildup right there. Just generally run your brush through there. You don't want to douse this thing in solvent, but you do want to clean this out. I'm running it through the bottom of the frame here. And I'm going to switch over. And I'm going to just see how clean or dirty we have that little feed ramp right there. Okay, it's actually looking pretty darn good. That doesn't look too bad at all. I don't see any buildup on it. It's feeling pretty good. Okay. Switch over here, get a little more solvent and get that going in that rail. Do the same thing over here on this side. We'll switch over to the brush just because it's way more suited to get in there and clean that. Hit it again on this side. Okay, now then I'm just gonna start breaking this stuff loose that was underneath the grip with this. Just doesn't require an awful lot of pressure. Look at how well that's coming off there without having to get crazy on it. Put a little solvent on here. Brush fired up on it there. Very gentle. You're not going to scratch the metal, but still absolutely no need in going all Hercules on that. It's just absolutely not called for. So let's start to wipe that down. I don't like to let that solvent sit on there for very long either. Okay, that's looking pretty darn good. Let's move over to this side. If you wonder why I'm getting solvent with my brush, it's because I'm trying to keep solvent off of my hands as much as possible. I literally ran a knife through my finger, and the solvent's not feeling too good on that. So we're being a little careful with that right now. Let's break all of these things loose. That's looking pretty darn good right there. All right, now let's go ahead and use our towel and get all of that excess off there. Remove all of that nice crud that we just broke loose. Okay, now it's time to get some more Q-tips after this. Start getting okay, pretty good. This side real clean. All right. Let's work right around the hammer down in here. Now, normally, like I said, I would disassemble this and I would take the spring out and I would get very detailed in here, but we're not doing that right now. And we're going to take our much cleaner cloth. It's not going to be much cleaner in just a second. And go ahead and clean out every bit of this frame now. If you get the right cloth, and this is not the right cloth, but if you get the right cloth, you can literally feed it through the weapon and actually use it to pull up through the frame. Grab the end of that and pull it up a little bit. Like I said, this is not the correct one, but we'll make it work. All right. All right, I'm feeling already a whole lot better about this frame. I've got a few more things I want to do to it here before we decide that it's done. Hammer up. All right, now what I'm going to do is get another Q-tip and I'm going to get down inside this. Every little place. So I'm even getting inside that little skeletonized trigger that I've got on here. Okay, this is looking pretty good right now. I even normally take these out and clean the threads on those. We're not doing any of that stuff today. We're just being very happy with getting this thing field stripped and field cleaned. All right, I feel pretty good about most of this right now. Okay, I see just a tiny little bit of stuff right here. Now I'm gonna try real hard to get out of there. There's just the tiniest little bit of buildup right there in that little slide rail. Okay, I think we just got it. There's still just every little tiny little bit there. Okay. Use the Yes, this is the knife that I put through my finger earlier. Okay, that's doing pretty good right there. Okay. All right, so point is, when you find something that needs extra attention, by all means, give it the extra attention. Okay. Now that I think that we'll move that on over there. Wipe these grips down just a little bit. All right, now then, I'm gonna clear some of this stuff off, and then we're gonna put this thing back together and get it oiled up and ready to go. All right, guys, now it's time to reassemble this Kimber. And I'm gonna do exactly what I have been doing, which is I'm not gonna get in a big hurry. I'm gonna take my time, and I'm not trying to be 100% right in everyone's eyes about how I go about this. It's the exact same thing. There's 1,000 different ways to do almost everything. If we went out there and found 10 different women and said, all right, how do you clean house? Some would say, oh, you've got to start by dusting the whole house. And another one would say, well, you need to start by getting all of your trash taken out and get all of your laundry in the washing machine, etc. There's going to be a million different ways to do these things, and all of them end up at the same place. You may have a more efficient way, or you may have a less efficient way. We're gonna go about it my way today, because I'm the one doing the video, and it's the only way that I know how to do it. So that being said, let's start by putting this nice little slide assembly back together. Okay. Now what we want to do first, I'm going to put a very, very light coat of oil on some of these things. And I'm going to, believe it or not, I am actually going to use some of these little makeup things I said I didn't know what they were for. I'd normally use a patch, but you know what? These seem like they might be really, really good for doing putting some oil on a few different things. So get that open and put just a few drops of oil on this. And what we're going to do first is just put a really light coat of oil on the outside of this barrel. And get that thing lubed up just a bit right there. Okay. I'm going to set that down. And then I'm going to get a Q-tip. A little bit of oil on it. And right inside these slide rails. Just a very, very light coat in there. Just a tiny little bit right here in the very end of the barrel. And the guide rails. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. All right, let's take this barrel and go ahead and put that lug forward. You're gonna slide this in the end just like it came out. Okay, well, that's gonna go in there. And then you're going to take your spring rod, and there is a little groove, a little U-shaped end. This is what you want sitting on your actual barrel. So we're going to put it in here and let it sit down on that barrel and have a nice little home right there, just like that. Okay. Now then, we're going to take this assembly and we're going to go ahead and slide the frame onto the slide. Before I do that, I'm going to get just a little bit of oil and I'm going to lubricate the part of the frame that goes into the slide rails. So we'll take our Q-tip and we're going to get just a little bit of oil right in there. We're not going crazy. Some people actually use their oil and put full drops. We're not doing that. We're not going that crazy. Some here. Just trying to hit the correct surfaces here. Everything that makes contact, we're making sure that it's got ample lubrication on it. Okay, so we've got that ready. Now what we're going to do is hold the slide barrel end away. Keep your spring guide in there. It's always a help. We're going to go ahead and put the frame back in the slide. Okay. Now slide that back together like that. Now then, we need to go ahead and get the pin put back in. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that hammer back so that we can actually move the slide back as far as we need to move it now. So I got that hammer lock back. And then what you're going to do is you're going to, if you put your hand on the end like this and rock it just slightly forward, then you're going to be able to find the exact right spot for this pin to drop in. Before we go in there, I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of oil on that thing. Okay, you have that thing done like that. Now what you don't want to do is end up putting this back in the gun and using this end that needs to go in that same little notch that we had to line up earlier. You don't want to scratch your gun right here. They call that the dummy scratch. You don't want to do that. So I'm gonna, with the gun tilted slightly forward, that should get that lug in just about the right position. So put the pin in, and then you can find out with the barrel whether or not you got it in, and I do. Okay, now then what I want to do is I'm going to lift this up. Okay, notice I didn't drag it across the gun right there. I'm going to slide this slide back until my notch is lined up, and then I'm very carefully going to go ahead and push this down into the gun right through that little groove right there. Okay, trying to hold this at an angle where you can actually see it. But you want to go ahead and push this there. It's going to come out on this side. Okay, so again, it's right there. That's through. And then we're going to come right up here. You've got to get that groove lined up just right. Keep that up off the gun. And then we'll slide this down into the gun where that groove is right there. Okay. Get it pushed in there. And it's going to pop out on that side. If your barrel is caught by the pin, then you're going to have that right there. Now the slide can go forward. And now we can work on putting everything in the end of the gun down here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that slide back. Now that guide rod is still loose in there, okay? But everything else is in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt this down like this. Now you remember the spring, what we said about how that goes. You've got a loose coil, and then you've got a flat end, and we want that flat end to go right down on this rod. We want that to go on there and seat real well, just like that. So I put the spring in. Okay. Now then I've got my spring cap right here. There's an awful lot of friction between the bottom of the frame and the spring cap, so it's fairly important to go ahead and get a little bit of oil on that. You're going to be handling it a lot, so you can go a little more on there with that. I'll even put a little bit on the inside, because as you handle this, you're going to end up losing some of that oil as you just get this put back in the gun. So I've got my loose coil up, putting my spring cap over that, and then I've got my bushing right here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with this bushing. I'm going to be sure that we've got a reasonable amount of oil on the outside of this. And then I'm going to go just a small amount on the inside. Okay, now then what we're going to do is we're going to push this down into the gun, and we're going to put the bushing in. Okay, now if you remember when the bushing came out, it had to be rotated that direction, correct? It had to be rotated over there. I'm going to go ahead and pull the spring back out so I can put this bushing in and show you what I'm talking about. So the bushing, in order to do this, that bushing has to be in there and rotated that way. That's where it's going to lock in, and this is where you would move it. It moves way up the side here in order to get that spring in there. So we don't need to be over there on that side because we're not taking it out, okay? Like this bushing will not lift out when it's turned to this side of the barrel, okay? So we're gonna move it over here, put it in, move it over here. Go ahead and put our spring in. And then we're gonna compress the spring down, okay? See if I can get that where I can show you. And I've got it just caught by the edge of this bushing right here, okay? Same deal again, where you can push down on this with your finger if you want to, but sometimes it's very, very helpful to have something, and in my case, you know, I've been using this Pro Mag to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to depress that, and then I'm going to go ahead and rotate this bushing on around. I went just a little too far there. That there just snapped into place. Okay, so now the bushing's in place right over that spring cap. Everything's good. Might be just a little excess oil. Go ahead and get that off. Okay, now let's turn it up this way. We've got everything almost reassembled. We can go ahead and put those grips back on. Now, a lot of people like to keep the same screws lined up with the exact same openings that they came out of, wherever your screw holes were, wherever these receivers were. But I'm not that person. So I did happen to put these, set these down in perfect order. So they are going back in the exact same holes that they came out of, but that's not something that I would typically worry too much about. Okay, now that same thing again, we don't want to knurl these things up. We want to be very careful with them. I'm going to run this one down until I just hit the bottom with it. Okay, that's going to stop right there. I'm not putting anything extra on that. Same thing on this one. I'll run this down just until it hits on the bottom, which is about right there. Okay, now then, here's where my very anal retentive part kicks in. So I'm going to turn this just a slight bit more until it's snug, and you notice that that screw is angled this way. I'm going to get this one, and I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to try real hard to get it to match that one. Okay, that one didn't match exactly. I'm going to back this one off just a little bit. Okay, not perfectly lined up, but not terribly off either. Okay, there. Now then, I like those two screws to be very matched up. Okay, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. Set that grip down on there, be sure it's seated well. That's the bottom screw. That is the top screw. Do the same thing again. I'm going to run this down until it just seats. Be extremely careful with that so we don't tear anything up. I've seen guys use electric screwdrivers before on things like this, and it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. Okay, that hit. Just started to get snug right there. Do the same thing on this one. Okay, it just got snug right there. All right, I'll go just a little bit more on that one and see where that one ends up angling. And now my goal would be to try and get this one lined up with that one, and I don't think we're gonna be able to go. Nope, we're gonna stop about right there. So we're gonna bring this one back just ever so slightly and let it line up the same. All right, and we're gonna pick it up and give it one last nice once over with the clean towel here. And then let's see how she did. All right, let's see how that slide feels now. Oh my goodness, that is fantastic. That is considerably better. That is absolutely fantastic. Okay, all right, I think we're back in business, guys. That's gonna wrap it up for doing the field strip and field cleaning of the Kimber full size 45 ACP. Now you can go ahead and hop in the comments and tell me everything that you think I should have done different. Just remember what I said. Just please be nice. Let's remember, like I said, we're all spinning around this planet all together, and we all have a certain suck factor going on. So it's never going to hurt to be nice to other people who share the same mindset and who are in the same community that you are. So, all right, guys, that's it for today. Stay safe and God bless.